A very good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, Jai Hind. I hope each one of you are doing great. So, in this session, we will be moving over the most prominent part of the Indian Constitution. A very important topic of our entire Indian polity, and today we will be understanding the genesis of this very important topic, which is called the judiciary. So today we'll be discussing the chapter 4 of class 8th NCERT, which is called the judiciary. Okay. And in this topic, we will be understanding all important concepts. We will be discussing all prominent ideals of how this concept has evolved, what all are the bases of this topic, and how judiciary ensures upholding of the Indian Constitution. Clear? So this is something that we will be discussing in this session today. Okay, so all of you who have joined me now in this session, I welcome each one of you here. And with this session, with this topic, you will understand a few important questions as to how this judiciary evolved as an independent component in the Constitution of India and what all are the underlying principles of judiciary. Clear? So, a very good afternoon to all of you who have joined me now in this session. Please do let me know, am I audible loud and clear? Chaliye. So now when we start off with this topic, okay, there are various questions that comes to our mind. Okay, and the biggest question is why judiciary? Okay, the biggest question is why judiciary? Now, in India, we have a concept that previously we had studied, the rule of law. Clear? We have this important concept that means the rule of law is applicable. Now, what does this rule of law means? It says that the laws apply equally to all persons. And there are a certain set of fixed procedures that need to be followed when a law is violated. Clear? So we have got this rule of law in the country applicable through the Constitution of India. But the larger question or the larger interest with this rule of law is that how would this rule of law be applicable? If we do not have a judicial system in India, then who would oversee the applicability of this rule of law? Now, this is the reason that as an organ of the government, the judiciary plays a very important role. Judiciary can play this role of being a supervisor only when the judiciary is said to be independent. So, we have studied that as the government, we had the legislature, previously we had seen the executives, and then we have the judiciary. Theek? Now we have got all of these things, but why does and how does this judiciary stands apart? How does this judiciary stands in a significant independent position to ensure that the constitution comes into play? Now, previously I had told you one thing. The best part of the constitution or the best feature of the constitution was the concept of a decentralized distribution of power. In our country, nobody enjoys the absolute control, the absolute power. Okay. Now, the legislatures cannot make absolute laws. If the legislature makes some law and that law is violative of the constitution, thus the judiciary will exercise its power of judicial review, and by that the judiciary will examine the constitutionality of any law. Okay, we have seen that the executives, they cannot exercise absolute control. Why? Because these executives are collectively responsible to the legislature. Clear? So, our constitution ensures one very beautiful thing, that nobody enjoys absolute powers in the country. Okay. Now, judiciary has got the role. So, see, legislature has the role of making laws. Executive has the role of executing laws. Okay. Now, judiciary plays the most important role of examining the constitutionality of both of these. Okay. Now, if any act is done that is in violative, any law that is done or any action that has been done as and that is violative of the constitution, the judiciary can nullify it. Clear? So we can see that judiciary acts as the constitutionally binding stick over the legislature as well as the executive. Clear? And this is why the role of judiciary becomes important. Clear? This is the reason why the role of judiciary becomes significant in our country. Clear? So, we have seen that Indian judiciary, it stands as an independent and impartial pillar of democracy. And it has the underlying responsibility of ensuring and upholding the rule of law, safeguarding the Constitution of India. Now, when we have to relate everything to the diversity of the country, we will understand that in a nation like India, okay, which is diverse and thus complex, the judiciary ultimately becomes as the arbitrator of all disputes. Okay. And this is the reason why we have seen that we have this pyramidal structure of judicial system in India. At the lowest level, we have got the subordinate courts which are there at the district level. Then we have got the high courts at the state level. And then we have got the Supreme Court which is at the central level. Clear? Or the union level. Now we can understand that the Supreme Court has got multiple responsibilities. Okay. Supreme Court is the highest court of appeals in India. Okay. Now, Supreme Court is essentially the custodian and final interpreter of the Constitution Clear? And Supreme Court essentially is at the apex of the judicial system in India. Clear? So you can understand that the responsibilities Supreme Court has at the union level, the similar responsibilities are exercised by the high courts at the state level and the subordinate courts at the district level. Clear? So by and large, we can understand that without such an effective, accessible and independent judicial system in India, the democratic fabric of governance, okay, would not work in India. The entire democratic structure in the country would crumble into pieces. Okay, so from we can witness from how from Gram Nyayalaya to the Supreme Court, the public trust in a country, the public trust in the government, the public trust in the governance of the country is maintained only through the Supreme Court. Clear? Because people have this belief that if everything goes wrong, they have this judicial system in India that will safeguard their rights, that will safeguard their ultimate liberty, their ultimate integrity, their ultimate respect, their ultimate rights in the social order in the country. Clear? So this judicial system, it essentially forms the bedrock of the entire constitutional system in the country. Clear? Now, when we talk about the role of judiciary, okay, what is the role of judiciary? Now, role of judiciary can be understood in various forms. Okay, first is the dispute resolution. Okay, now this dispute resolution essentially means upholding the rule of law. Okay, upholding the rule of law, that is the ultimate concept of this judiciary. Okay, so judicial system, it provides you a mechanism for resolving all disputes. Okay, and these disputes are not just between the citizens, it is between the government, the union government and the state governments, between various state governments, and even between the center and multiple state governments. Clear? So this is how that the court ensures that this rule of law is implemented. Clear? So judiciary involves and it prevents all sorts of arbitrary exercise of powers. Clear? Now, by stopping the arbitrary exercise of power, it ensures that governance in the country is established according to the legal principles. Clear? Now, this second principle is the judicial review. Now, this judicial review, what does it mean? This judicial review, it clearly means the examination of constitutionality. Clear? So it means the examining the constitutionality. So the power of judiciary is to examine constitutionality of the laws passed by the legislators and legislature and all the actions which are carried out by the executives. Clear? So if a law or if an executive action is found to be violative of the constitution, the judiciary can declare it null and void. The judiciary can declare it ultra vires, and this power is very, very crucial for maintaining the supremacy of the constitution. Clear? So what does it say? The ultimate feature of our constitution is that our constitution is supreme. Okay, we have studied that in a country like India, it is not the lawmaker which are supreme. It is not the executive that is supreme. It is not the one who has made the law which is supreme, but in India it is the law that is made in accordance to the constitution is supreme. Clear? So India thus runs through the rule of law. Okay. Next is upholding the law and enforcing the fundamental rights. Clear? So the Supreme Court as well as the High Courts, they have been made the guardians of the fundamental rights. Clear? So herein we can see that Supreme Court and the High Court, they are the guardians of fundamental rights. Okay. If an individual's fundamental rights are violated, the individual has the ultimate power to approach even the highest court of law in the country, that is the Supreme Court, or they can even approach the high courts. Clear? And in this situation, we can see that Supreme Court had has this power under Article 32. The high courts have this power under Article 226. And this very Article 32 has been rightly called the heart and soul of the Constitution of India, because this is the article that is protecting fundamental rights, and these fundamental rights in turn are protecting the democratic structure of the country. Clear? So we can see that these fundamental rights or any of these things, they are ultimately required. Clear? Okay, so we can see that every citizen of India can approach the Supreme Court or the High Court if they believe that their fundamental rights have been violated. Clear? So we can understand that the judiciary has got all of these powers. Okay, and all of these powers can only be exercised. Okay, these can only be exercised when the judiciary works independently. Clear? So these powers, we have seen that they have some powers which are essential for governance in the country. Okay. Now, along with the governance, we have seen the Supreme Court has got various other powers also. Supreme Court under Article 143 also enjoys advisory jurisdiction. Okay. The Supreme Court shall advise the President of India upon any matter relating to urgent public importance that has been referred to it by the President of India. Clear? So the judiciary in turn has got greater role to play. Okay, and we can also understand that judicial system or the judicial structure in the country, they are also leading the way to the government as well as to the legislature to ensure the better governance and democratic principles to its citizens. Clear? Now, the next thing that we come up is what is an independent judiciary? Okay. Now, our constitution essentially talks about the judicial system. Okay. And our judicial system is essentially working upon the principle of separation of powers. Okay. Now, you might have heard of various things. Okay. How independence is ensured. Clear? The bigger question is that all of us understand that there has to be an independent judiciary. But bigger question is that how does our constitution ensures that the judiciary works independently? Okay. Now, if we have to see the salary and allowances and the pensions. Clear? Taking an example for the judges of Supreme Court. Okay. For judges of Supreme Court, these are charged upon the consolidated fund of India, and they are made part of the charged expenditure. Clear? Now, all of you must be thinking that, sir, there are various other things which are charged, which are drawn from the consolidated fund. Okay, but this charged expenditure is the non-votable part of the constitution. Okay, by non-voting, by being a non-votable part of the constitution, it essentially means that the parliament cannot discuss, okay, or and can decrease the salary of the judges of Supreme Court. So this is just one single way of ensuring independence to the judges of Supreme Court. Okay, just remember, if in our constitution the judiciary would not have been given this level of independence, then the executives might have misused it. Okay, in this situation, if the executives are about to come up with a decision, or if a law is being framed that is not in the best interest of the people, if the judiciary would not have been independent, then the executives, then the legislature might have any time blackmailed the judges. Okay, and the judges would not have been able to work in an independent manner. The judges would have been influenced, because, as just take an example, if the executive says that if you do not work, if you do not act as per our whims and fancies, we might reduce your salaries. Now this is something that would influence, that would affect the judges working. So the constitution ensures that the judges work independently. Clear? The judges would not be partial to anyone. The judges would not be partial to the executives or to the legislature. Okay. Now, also in this, understand one thing. Another example, the judges, while they are being recruited or while they are being removed, okay, they have there is a fixed procedure to be followed. Okay, now this is, you can understand that the highest executives in India, the president of India, okay, the executive with the real set of powers, the prime minister of India, now no matter how much influential the president and the prime minister are in the country, but they cannot get somebody appointed as a judge in the Supreme Court or any high court in India by their own whims and fancies. Okay, so it is the judiciary that has established a proper procedure, proper way that has to be followed. Clear? They cannot be removed anytime by the President of India, because an entirely laid down parliamentary process has to be followed. Clear? So there are fixed procedures, there are fixed processes that have to be followed during the recruitment as well as for the removal of the judges. Clear? Now, we have seen that in our country, there are various times when people make very open-ended statements. Okay, like politicians driving the country, the rich people driving the country. Okay, but the Indian Constitution protects the judiciary from being influenced by either the politicians or through the rich people. Clear? And this is the reason why the judiciary ensures independence is through the separation of powers. Clear? It is through the separation of power. Clear? In this separation of power, nobody can interfere in the work of judiciary. Okay, and even though they are the pillars of governance in the country, they are not under any government. The government cannot work on the behalf of the courts. Clear? So this is the reason we have seen that they work. Clear? Moreover, we have seen that they do have fixed tenures. Clear? So the judges of Supreme Court, High Court, okay, they are appointed to for a fixed tenure. Okay, and their process of removal has also been made relatively a complex process. Clear? So it is the independence of the judiciary that allows the courts in India to play a very important central role in ensuring that there is no misuse of power by the legislature as well as the executive. And thus, they play a very crucial role in protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens. Clear? And thus, they essentially form the basis of the democratic fabric of this country. Clear? Now, next thing, as we have already seen, the structure of the courts in India. Okay, so there are three different levels of courts. Okay, so the courts that most people interact with are called the subordinate or district courts, and these are usually at the district or the tehsil level. Clear? So we have seen that this is how this system it works. Clear? So how these courts they work? Clear? Each state, we have seen that each state is divided into various districts. The entire country, as we have seen, the country has been divided into 28 states and 8 union territories. Clear? Now, in total of these 28 states and 8 union territories, there are 25 high courts. Clear? The latest high court in India is the High Court of Andhra Pradesh. Clear? That was established in Amravati. Okay, so each state has a high court which is the highest court of the state. Moreover, there are common high courts that have also been established by the 7th Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay, so at the top is Supreme Court, which is located in New Delhi, presided over by the Chief Justice of India and other judges. Clear? Now, the decisions which are made by the Supreme Court are binding upon all courts in the country. Clear? So, this is the pyramidal structure that establishes the structure of high courts in the country. Okay. Now, many a times you might have been confused as to how these high courts have been established. So, these high courts, for the very first time, they were established during the British times. Okay. During the British times, there were 3 British presidencies. Okay, presidencies of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. So, first and foremost, the high courts were established in these presidencies in 1862. The fourth high court which was established was the Allahabad High Court. And then, if we talk about the high courts in the national capital region of Delhi, that high court was established in 1966. Clear? And this is how presently India has got 25 high courts. There are various high courts which are common high courts. Okay, there are states, there are union territories that have been that have got common high courts. Clear? So we have seen that the most recent high court was the High Court of Andhra Pradesh, established at Amravati, and it started working on 1st January 2019. Clear? Moreover, there are a few high courts. So, in highly populated states, there are few high courts where they have got their multiple benches established. Okay, so the multiple benches have been established for better accessibility of those high courts. Clear? So you need to understand that even though there are different levels of courts, okay, they are connected with each other. Okay, and there is a Supreme Court, integrated court at the top. Clear? So in India, we have an integrated judicial system, which means that decisions made by the higher courts are binding upon the lower courts. Okay? Now, if you are not satisfied with the decision of a subordinate court, you can appeal at the High Court. There are mechanisms. If you are not satisfied with the decision of High Court, you can appeal in the Supreme Court. Clear? So, this is how you have to understand this integration. How does it work? Clear? It means that a person can appeal to a higher court if they believe that the judgment passed by the lower court is not justified or they are not satisfied. Clear? So we have seen these things, that how essentially it works. Okay. Now, when we further look into this, okay, when you further look into this, you can understand that these courts have got various ways, various processes, okay, and there are different types or categories of cases that have been existing. Clear? Now, this topic also makes us understand the entire judicial system and this entire way of appeal by an example. Okay, so the topic gives us an example of a case of state versus Lakshman Kumar that went from lower courts to the Supreme Court. Okay, now how does these court cases proceed? How does the appeals are filed, and how essentially the higher courts work in order to satisfy the litigants? Clear? So it was in February 1980. Lakshman Kumar was married to a 20-year-old lady, Sudha. They lived in a flat, okay, in a joint family, okay, and it was in 1980, few months after the marriage, okay, that Lakshman's wife Sudha had died. Now Sudha's family had filed a case in the court, okay, and this case went to the trial court, okay. In this case, the neighbors of Lakshman and Sudha, they were called, four neighbors were called as the witness. And those witnesses, they stated that they had heard the hues and cries of Sudha, okay, after which they had entered the flat of Lakshman and Sudha, okay. Therein they had seen that Sudha was standing, okay, and she was in flames, okay. They extinguished the fire, okay, around Sudha, okay, and it was then that Sudha had told them about how her mother-in-law had poured kerosene oil on her and her husband had lit the fire, okay. Now this was something during the trial. The members of Sudha's family and neighbors stated that Sudha had been subjected to domestic violence, torture by in-laws for demanding more dowry, okay, and also for demanding valuables, okay. Now it was in the defense, Lakshman and his mother stated that Sudha's sari had accidentally caught fire while she was working in the kitchen. Now on the basis of this and other evidence, the trial court had first convicted Lakshman, his mother and his brother-in-law, and all of them were sentenced to death. Now, how the case further unfolded, that it was in 1983, the three individuals who were sentenced to death, they went to the High Court to appeal against this verdict. Okay, the High Court had heard the arguments of the lawyers, okay, and it decided that Sudha had died due to an accidental fire by the kerosene stove. Now, you understand, the trial court gave them death. The High Court had acquitted them from the death. Okay. Now, it was during this time, okay, that the women's group, okay, they had all been talking about the dowry deaths, okay, and they all protested against the failure of courts to bring this the perpetrators to justice. The High Court's judgment had then deeply troubled women, and they held demonstrations and filed separate appeal against this High Court decision in the Supreme Court. Okay, and it was in 1985 that Supreme Court had heard this appeal against the acquittal of Lakshman and his two other family members, and Supreme Court had also heard the arguments of the lawyers, and they reached a decision that was against the High Court. Clear? They had found that Lakshman and his mother were guilty but had acquitted the brother-in-law of Lakshman, okay, because they did not have evidences against him. Now Supreme Court decided to send the accused person in prison for life. So just remember, in a trial court, a decision was given. They appealed in the High Court. Okay, High Court's decision was changed by Supreme Court, but that was different from what the trial court had given. Clear? So we can understand one more thing herein, that the subordinate courts, they are basically called the trial courts. Okay, and it is there that the first level of judicial trial is undertaken. Okay, and it is further that those evidences, those decisions, they are examined carefully and further judicial actions are proceeded. Clear? So by this example, the author tries to make you understand that how do they work. Clear? Now this topic also lets you understand about different branches of legal system. Clear? Now there are cases of dowry death falling under the crime against the society, okay, which is violation of the criminal law. Now, criminal law, the legal system also deals with the civil law. Clear? So, herein we will understand what is the significant difference between civil and the criminal law. Okay. Now, in the criminal law, what does a criminal law means? Now, it deals with conduct or acts that law defines as offenses. For example, theft, harassing a woman to bring more dowry, murder. Okay. It usually begins with the lodging of an first information report with the police, who investigates the crime, after which a case is filed in the court. If found guilty, the accused can be sent to jail and also fined. Okay. So just remember, now this makes you understand one more aspect, that our constitution does not define the exact scope of the criminal and civil laws. Okay, and it is the cases are categorized as criminal, or the acts are categorized as criminal or civil acts as per the laws that have been created in India. So previously we have got the criminal procedure code, then we have got the civil procedure code, latest we have got the BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, that has been created. So the categories, how they are categorized, how they are understood, it is through those principles. Clear? Similarly, in civil case, they deal with any harm or injury to rights of individuals, to civil laws. For example, disputes relating to sale of land, purchase of goods, rent matters, divorce cases, etc. So basically, if you have to understand the aspect of civil laws, just remember that it has broadly been classified into four categories: marriage, divorce, inheritance, okay, and uh, essentially the disputes around the properties. Clear? So in these cases, in these civil laws, first a petition has to be filed before a relevant court. Okay. Okay. Acha, I just told you it has marriage, divorce, inheritance, and adoption. So these are four categories of civil laws. Clear? Now, in this, a petition has to be filed before the relevant court. Okay. And in civil cases, only the affected party can file. Clear? Moreover, if it is a case like a rent matter, it is either a landlord or a tenant that can file the case. Clear? In this case, the court gives the specific relief that is asked. For instance, if this is a case between a landlord and a tenant, the court can order the flat to be vacated and pending rent to be paid. Clear? So, in this situation, we have seen that how these acts work. Now, in order to ensure that the judicial system is working efficiently, the courts must have access, the everyone must have access to the courts. Clear? So in principle, all citizens can access the courts in this country. Now it basically means that every citizen has the right to justice through the courts. Okay, and these courts thus play a very significant role in protecting our fundamental rights. Okay, now if an individual, if any citizen, it feels that their rights are being violated, then they can approach the courts for justice. Okay, so effectively the courts are available to all. Okay, and since the legal process at times can become very unaffordable for the poor, thus our constitution ensures that free legal aid must be provided to those who cannot afford it. Okay, so even though the constitution gives you the right to access the courts to all, but there are instances wherein poor cannot afford, and thus the enabling provisions have also been made in the constitution. Clear? Moreover, it has been around the 1980s, the Supreme Court, in order to understand and to ensure the access of courts to all, they also came up with a provision of PIL, public interest litigation. In this public interest litigation, it allowed that any individual or organization can file a PIL in the High Court or the Supreme Court on behalf of those of whose rights are being violated. Clear? So essentially, it is not always the affected party that has to file the case, but in the Supreme Court or in the High Court, even individual on behalf of an affected individuals, the victim, they can file the PIL. So PIL are basically to undertake urgent matters, okay, of public interest litigation. Clear? So this legal process has greatly been simplified. Okay. Moreover, in this PIL, even it is mentioned that a telegram, that a postcard, that a letter that is addressed to Supreme Court or High Court could be treated as a PIL. Okay. Moreover, previously, PILs used to secure justice on large number of issues, such as recently we have seen the manual scavenging PILs have made their way and have fought for the people. Okay. Previously, PILs have rescued the bonded laborers. Okay, they have even rescued people, bonded laborers from inhuman and the work conditions that have been below the basic dignity to the individuals. Clear? Moreover, we have also seen that various big issues like the midday meal to the children, okay, is also through PIL. Clear? So we have seen that the rights of people, the basic humanistic principles have been implemented only when the judicial processes have been made simpler in the country. Clear? So we need to understand that for a common man, okay, for a common citizen, access to the courts in the country is access to justice. The courts exercise crucial role in interpreting fundamental rights of citizens, and previously also we have seen that article 21 of the constitution that talks about right to life, okay, includes not just a specific right to life, it includes variety of rights under this umbrella. Right to food even have been made part of it. Clear? So previously we have seen that how the states have been ordered to take various steps to include midday meal scheme for the children. Okay. Moreover, there have been various court judgments that people believe work against the best interest of the common person. Okay. So we have seen both the sides of the judgments. Okay. So as the people have various times they have categorically said that court judgments have been even against the interest. Okay, so we have seen that cases of activists who work on issues concerning the right to shelter and housing for poor believe that the recent judgments on the evictions, okay, orders that have been given by the courts are against their earlier judgments. Clear? So we have seen that recent judgments that tends to view the slum dwellers as encroachers. Okay, so there have been various judgments around these that have been interpreted in a negative way by the people. Okay, and have also been against those activists who had tried to protect the livelihoods of slum dwellers. Clear? So there have been both sides, but the courts in itself in general have been trying to ensure that the rights of the people are upheld. Clear? So we have seen that there have been various other things. Okay, there have been various measures that have been taken in various courses of time to ensure that best judgment is delivered in favor of people. Clear? Now, we have also seen that there have been various other issues that have affected the common person's access to justice. Clear? And now people have been very dissatisfied and disgruntled due to long number of years that courts have had to hear cases to resolve the cases. Okay, moreover, people have also highlighted that justice delayed is justice denied. Clear? And this justice delayed and is justice denied is primarily used to showcase that the extended time periods that the courts have taken to resolve disputes, to provide justice to the people. Clear? So our judicial system essentially is based upon the principle that no matter how much delay happens or no matter how many people walk free, but no innocent must ever be punished. Clear? So there has been no denying that the judiciary has played a crucial role in establishing democracy in the country and serving as a check on the power of executives in the legislatures, and it has many a times protected the rights of the citizens. Clear? The members of the Constituent Assembly had very rightly envisioned that the system of courts with an independent judiciary is essentially the key feature of this constitution. Clear? So the constitution makers, while framing the constitution, were of the opinion that if this judiciary is made independent, is brought out of all influences, then only the constitution will be able to work in the form as it has been envisioned by the constitution makers and probably the people who were an important part of that. Clear? Chaliye. So this is essentially the gist of this topic. Everything I have covered around the same. Okay. Moreover, do join me in my Telegram channel wherein I'll share the annotated PDF of this session. Okay. Along with it, today the batches are starting. So our GS Foundation batches in our P2I courses, which are based upon the SMART model of preparation, they are starting today. Okay. The batches are priced at 11,999. Moreover, you may use this code SRM Live to avail maximum discount. You may avail maximum discount by using this code SRM Live. Clear? So I hope all of you would have understood this. In case you have got any doubt, please do let me know. Okay, and do join me daily in the Smart NCERT series sessions that I come up with daily at 3 p.m. Clear? So this was all.